It's an absolute hell living under the same roof. Every night, while my sister sleeps, he comes down to the kitchen, asks for a glass of water, and there we stand, in the dim light, 5 steps from destroying our family. It's only a matter of time until one of us gives in. The truck sputtered away, leaving me standing on the curb with 2 suitcases and a mountain of regret. 6 years ago, I swore I'd never return to this house, but debt has a way of silencing pride. Now I was forced to accept the temporary kindness of my sister, Elisa, and her fiancé, Gabriel. The moment I stepped over the threshold, the familiar scent of wood smoke and his specific cologne hit me, a nostalgic punch that stole my breath and whispered one horrifying truth. This proximity was going to break me. Elisa rushed over, embracing me with a warmth that felt both genuine and suffocating. She was glowing, her left hand flashing with the brand new engagement ring Gabriel had slipped on her finger just last month. "I'm so glad you're here, Livia," she chirped, completely oblivious to the history swirling between us. She had no idea that her perfect fiancé was the same boy who taught me how to drive stick shift and whose name I'd cried out during my first heartbreak. Gabriel entered the living room holding a mug of coffee. He froze mid-step when our eyes locked. That moment, heavy and silent, was where my sanity began to fray. He managed a curt nod, his expression guarded, but his gaze held a flicker. A dark, immediate acknowledgement of our shared, secret past. He hadn't just been my first love. He was the first man who ever truly saw me. And now he was forbidden territory. I watched him casually sling an arm around Elisa's shoulders, pulling her clothes as they laughed about some anecdote from their workday. The sight of their easy intimacy, the way she leaned into his touch, fueled a toxic mixture of guilt and burning, undeniable jealousy. I saw the coat he wore yesterday draped over the chair, and the subtle scent was a tormenting reminder of what I'd willingly walked away from and what she effortlessly possessed. The days blurred into a cycle of forced smiles and agonizing avoidance. Dinner was the worst. Sitting across from them, listening to their wedding plans, watching Gabriel feed Elisa a piece of dessert as a joke, I felt the ugly, corrosive envy bloom inside me, a parasite feeding on my forced silence. My financial distress was temporary, but the emotional dependency on his presence, despite the pain, felt terminal. The sun set and the house fell quiet. I knew the routine. Elisa slept soundly, an angel unaware of the devil lurking in the shadows. And then came the soft thud of Gabriel's feet hitting the floor. But every night, while my sister sleeps, he comes down to the kitchen. He asks for a glass of water. And there we stand, in the dim light, 5 steps from destroying our family. It's only a matter of time until one of us gives in. The first few nights were a dance of evasion, a highly rehearsed performance of 2 people pretending the kitchen island was an ocean. We exchanged tense pleasantries like "can't sleep," "rough day," and then retreated quickly, our hearts pounding wildly. But last night, the dam finally broke. Elisa had worked late, and when I came downstairs, Gabriel was already there, leaning against the counter, lit only by the dim glow of the streetlight outside. He wasn't getting water. He was just standing there, lost in thought. His vulnerability was a weapon. I tried to back away silently, but the floorboards beneath the pantry creaked like a cannon shot in the silent house. He turned, his eyes searching the darkness, and the usual wary look disappeared, replaced by something raw and desperate. That raw look confirmed what I already knew. The story was alive for him too. "Livia, wait," he said, his voice a low, husky whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. I stopped, rooted to the spot by a need I couldn't control. He took a step toward me, then another, slowly closing the distance that was supposed to keep us safe. I should have ran back upstairs, shouted Elisa's name, or started making a loud coffee. But I stayed there, trapped by my own treacherous heart. We were only a foot apart now, in the exact spot where he kissed me for the first time 7 years ago, during a drunken high school reunion neither of us had ever forgotten. The memory flooded the present moment, thick and intoxicating. His gaze landed on my lips, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the intense pull of a magnetic field trying to pull us together. The air was charged, thick with what we both wanted to deny. "This is crazy, Gabriel," I managed to whisper, the words barely audible. "Elisa's upstairs. We can't do this." He didn't respond with words, but he lifted his hand, his thumb gently stroking the tear that had escaped my eye, a tear I hadn't even realized I was crying. It was the softest touch, but it felt like a complete and overwhelming surrender. He didn't need to speak. The gesture was a confession. He lowered his hand, his resolve momentarily sagging. He looked utterly defeated, staggering back, putting the necessary distance between us again. I knew I had to get out of there, but the drama trapped us. I could only hope that, just as I was trapped here, you would be trapped in this story. Subscribe to the channel. "You're right," he murmured, shaking his head, his eyes burning with frustration. "But I dream about this every night." Gabriel's desperate admission hung in the air like a forbidden perfume, contaminating every corner of the house. After that night in the kitchen, avoidance became impossible. The silence between us was now heavier, loaded with the weight of his whispered secret. I found myself obsessively tracking his movements, trying to decipher his moods, searching for the same tortured frustration I felt reflected in his eyes. This wasn't love anymore. It was an addiction to the pain of proximity. The tension peaked during a casual Sunday lunch. Elisa, completely oblivious, began detailing her bridal shower plans, turning to me for suggestions about the guest list. Gabriel was peeling an orange, but when Elisa mentioned the seating arrangement, he squeezed the fruit so tightly that juice squirted onto his hand. He quickly wiped it, but the sudden physical reaction was a loud signal directed only at me. It was a stark reminder of the impossibility of our situation. He was committing to her, publicly and irrevocably, yet he was confessing his dreams to me in the dead of night. His actions were cruel, not only to Elisa but to me as well, keeping me tethered to a hope that was actively dying. I watched as Elisa reached across the table and kissed his cheek, a simple, loving gesture that twisted the knife of my jealousy. Later that afternoon, I went to the laundry room to retrieve my clothes. Gabriel was there, folding his shirts. I tried to slip past him, but he blocked the exit. He didn't speak. He just held up a shirt, one of my old, faded cotton tees that I often wore as a sleep shirt. It must have gotten mixed in with his laundry. He was holding my shirt, and suddenly my mind flashed to 100 mornings we had spent intertwined in those same pajamas. His expression softened, a deep sadness filling his eyes. "I found this," he said, his voice barely a breath. I remembered you used to borrow it." He handed it back, and our fingers brushed, a jolt of electricity that was brief, agonizing, and entirely deliberate on his part. He lingered just a second too long, forcing me to feel the warmth of his skin against mine, reminding me of the connection. I snatched the shirt back, my hand trembling with a mix of fury and desire. "It's just an old shirt, Gabriel," I retorted, trying to sound indifferent, though my voice cracked slightly. "Don't read into everything." He didn't challenge my lie. He only looked away, his jaw tight. But as he walked out, I noticed a tiny detail. The shirt he had been folding was stained with a lipstick mark that wasn't Elisa's shade. The lipstick stain on Gabriel's collar wasn't bright red like the shade I sometimes wear, but a subtle, dusty rose, a color Elisa never touches. The tiny detail lodged itself in my mind, introducing a fresh, sharp edge of suspicion to my overwhelming jealousy. Was he dreaming about me, or was he seeking comfort somewhere else, perhaps trying to extinguish the forbidden flame he kept reigniting between us? The thought of him with a third person, a complete stranger, was a surprisingly painful twist. I spent the next day observing him, not just looking for signs of residual affection for me, but looking for secrets. He was meticulous, perhaps overly so. He kept his phone face down on the kitchen counter and answered work calls with a quick intensity that bordered on panic. When Elisa asked him about his lunch plans, he was vague, simply stating he had a client meeting downtown that would run late. The vagueness was a new addition to his usually transparent routine. That evening, Gabriel was indeed late. Elisa was worried, pacing the living room, checking her watch every 5 minutes. Her vulnerability softened my hard shell of resentment. "He always calls if he's going to be this delayed," she mumbled, her voice tight with anxiety. I felt a pang of guilt for being happy about his absence, even as a small, wicked part of me hoped his delay meant something complicated, something that could derail their perfect future. Around 10 o'clock, he finally walked in, looking tired and rumpled, his tie slightly askew. He immediately went to Elisa, apologizing profusely about the meeting running over and his phone battery dying. He hugged her tightly, almost desperately, a performance of contrition that felt just a little too polished. But as he turned to look at me, standing near the staircase, his eyes were cold and distant, a complete blank slate. Later, as I was closing my bedroom door, I heard Elisa's soft, relieved laughter coming from their room, a sound that should have reassured me, but only deepened my unease. I realized the secret wasn't just my feelings or his confession of dreams. The real secret was the unsettling feeling that Gabriel was hiding more than just our past. He was hiding something huge from his fiancé right now. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I needed to pack my bags and leave this toxic environment. But the detective in me, fueled by a mixture of old love and new suspicion, couldn't walk away yet. I had to know if he was truly committed to Elisa, or if he was tangled in a web that would eventually hurt my sister. And I knew the only way to find the truth was to search his private texts. The decision to violate Gabriel's privacy felt nauseating, a true betrayal of my sister. Yet the fear of what he might be doing outweighed my moral compass. The need to protect Elisa, or maybe just the desperate need to confirm the instability of their perfect life, was a powerful motivator. I waited until the early hours of the morning, when their rhythmic, synchronized breathing confirmed they were deeply asleep, a closeness I envied and resented. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tiptoed into the living room where Gabriel had left his work backpack. I found his phone tucked deep inside a side pocket. It was locked, of course, protected by a 6-digit code. For a terrifying moment, I thought my mission was over before it began, forcing me to face the uncomfortable truth with no answers. I almost put it back, defeated by the digital barrier. Then, a sudden, blinding memory hit me. 7 years ago, when we first dated, Gabriel insisted that his password was always the anniversary of his parents, calling it a tribute to true love. Quickly, I typed in the old, significant date. The phone hesitated for a second, then clicked open with a triumphant little chime. The ease with which the old code worked was a punch. It meant he hadn't fully let go of his past sentimentality, or maybe he hadn't changed at all. I went straight to his messages. There were the usual texts from work and a loving thread with Elisa, full of endearing emojis and plans for their future. I scrolled quickly, feeling like a thief stealing precious seconds. The tension mounted with every mundane message I bypassed until I finally reached a conversation thread at the very bottom titled only with an initial, M. The messages weren't overtly romantic, but they were intimate and undeniably frequent. They spoke of shared burdens and unbearable secrets. Gabriel's last message to M read, "I need to see you, tonight. I can't keep pretending with her anymore. It's becoming too much." My blood ran cold. This was not a professional contact, but a clandestine, deeply emotional connection. Before I could scroll further and determine the identity of M, I heard a sound, a distinct creak from the floorboard right outside the living room door. My adrenaline spiked. The sound was too close, too intentional to be a dream. I froze behind the sofa, holding my breath, straining to identify the intruder. The air was thick with panic. The silence stretched for an agonizing minute, broken only by the frantic rush of my own pulse. I realized I was trapped. Moving now would confirm my guilt and expose my spying. Then, a flicker of light appeared beneath the living room door, a phone screen. It wasn't Gabriel's rhythmic steps or Elisa's familiar shuffle. The light was held low, hesitating, as if the person on the other side was listening intently, perhaps waiting for me to make a mistake. The feeling of being watched was paralyzing, far worse than the fear of being caught by Gabriel himself. The door finally opened, slowly and silently, revealing not a stranger, but my sister, Elisa. She was wearing a silk robe, her face pale and drawn, holding her phone like a flashlight. She didn't look angry. She looked utterly lost. Relief washed over me for a second, quickly replaced with a fresh wave of dread. Why was she lurking in the dark, and how much had she seen? Elisa didn't immediately see me hidden behind the large sofa. She moved toward the staircase, her head bowed, clearly disturbed. I stayed frozen, desperate for her to just go back to bed. But just as she reached the stairs, she stopped, letting out a small, choked sob. It was a sound of true, deep heartbreak, the kind that can only come from a private, devastating realization. I knew I couldn't just watch her suffer. Rising slowly from my hiding place, I whispered her name. "Elisa? What's wrong?" She whirled around, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. Her hand flew to her mouth, not in surprise that I was there, but in a desperate effort to contain her grief. "Livia," she whispered, the name thick with despair. She walked straight past me, ignoring my question, moving instead toward Gabriel's discarded backpack. She retrieved his phone, her movements practiced and deliberate, as if this wasn't the first time. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, and her words weren't accusatory, but mournful. "I saw the texts, Livia, the ones from M. He's been meeting someone else." Elisa's confession hit me with the force of an avalanche. All my complex guilt, jealousy, and fear about my own feelings for Gabriel instantly evaporated, replaced by a fierce, protective rage for my sister. Her eyes, usually so bright with uncomplicated happiness, were mirrors of profound devastation. The betrayal was real, but the perpetrator wasn't who she thought. "Elisa, wait!" I urged, stepping closer, my voice low and urgent. "You can't jump to conclusions. Who is M?" I knew the identity of M was critical, yet a treacherous thought flashed through my mind. Could I use this accusation to drive a wedge, making the separation inevitable? I immediately crushed the cynical idea, focusing on the sister who was trembling before me. She shook her head, clutching the phone tightly. "I don't know who she is, but I know what he's doing. This is why he was late yesterday, Livia. He's been distant, secretive. I've seen the strain in his face, but I thought it was just wedding stress." Her voice cracked, revealing the magnitude of the trust that had just been shattered. She was heartbroken, and her pain was entirely authentic. My previous anger at Gabriel for his cruelty softened into something more nuanced. He wasn't just avoiding me, he was consumed by a huge external problem that was clearly tearing him apart. Still, nothing excused the emotional devastation he was inflicting on Elisa. I knew I couldn't tell her about our past now. It would only be a second, more catastrophic blow. We sat together on the floor, two women sharing a single heavy misery. She leaned her head on my shoulder, a gesture we hadn't shared since childhood. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, the tears soaking my pajama top. "I can't face our mother. I can't call off the wedding. Everything is paid for." Her worry wasn't just heartbreak. It was the panic of social ruin. "We will figure this out, together," I promised, holding her tight, the sisterly bond suddenly restored and strengthened by this shared secret. But as I offered her comfort, a devastating thought occurred to me. If Gabriel was cheating, his guilt might be a desperate distraction from his true emotional conflict, the fact that he still loved me. And if he confessed the truth about us to Elisa, her devastation would be the least of our problems. The next morning, the atmosphere at the breakfast table was a study in forced normalcy. Elisa was pale, but determined, moving through her routine like a well-wound doll, offering Gabriel his coffee with a false, cheerful smile. Gabriel was quiet, obviously burdened by his secret, oblivious that Elisa now carried a piece of it too. I watched them both, my stomach churning with the knowledge of what was bubbling beneath their fragile surface. Elisa and I devised the plan. Instead of confronting him immediately, we decided to follow him that afternoon. Gabriel had mentioned a client presentation near the financial district. This was the perfect opportunity to unmask M. The thought of catching him in the act made me feel sick. Yet the need for clarity, for a decisive end to the agony, propelled me forward. I told Elisa to wait in the car while I trailed him closely. We arrived at the designated street, a busy, anonymous block downtown. Gabriel emerged from his car, looking professional and impeccably dressed, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He walked briskly and entered an old, unmarked building that looked more abandoned than corporate. Elisa gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white, her composure threatening to shatter. "Stay here, Elisa. I'll go ahead and see what's happening. If it's bad, I'll come back and we'll face him together." I followed Gabriel into the dusty lobby and found an ancient directory on the wall. The name next to the floor Gabriel went to was not a law firm or a design studio. It was a name that made my blood run cold. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, my heart pounding a terrifying rhythm against the silence of the empty building. When I reached the correct floor, the door was slightly apart. I pushed it open just enough to see inside. Gabriel was standing with his back to me, the briefcase open on the table. The person sitting opposite him was not a woman. The person Gabriel was meeting, the mysterious M who shared unbearable secrets and caused my sister so much pain, was a man. A stern-looking private investigator surrounded by stacks of legal papers concerning a major corporate lawsuit. This was not a betrayal of love. It was something far more dangerous. And as I heard the investigator mention a large sum of money and a family name, I knew Gabriel's trouble was tied directly to my family's legacy. The shock of the revelation was immediate and crippling. Gabriel wasn't cheating on my sister with a lover. He was entangled in a serious, undisclosed legal battle involving someone from our own family, someone named M. The thought immediately shifted the focus of my jealousy and pain to genuine alarm. Gabriel was protecting Elisa from a corporate disaster, not a romantic affair. I retreated silently, rushing back down the stairs and into the car where Elisa was anxiously waiting. I didn't tell her everything. The full truth would only confuse and terrify her. Instead, I focused on the immediate relief. "It's not what we thought, Elisa. It's a man, a lawyer, or investigator. This is about work, or maybe a massive secret debt. It's not a romantic affair." Elisa's initial relief was palpable, followed quickly by confusion. A secret legal battle? Why wouldn't he tell me? She demanded, her voice tight with renewed suspicion. We're about to get married. We are supposed to share everything. Her hurt had transitioned from the pain of infidelity to the pain of profound exclusion, a wound that might be harder to heal. I knew the answer lay in that initial M and the family name the investigator had mentioned. I began desperately searching my memory for anyone in our extended family whose name began with M and who might have crossed paths with Gabriel professionally. The only person who fit the description was our estranged Uncle Marcus, a man known for his ruthless business practices and his tendency to drag family into his messes. Later that evening, after giving Elisa a carefully edited version of the events, I confronted Gabriel when he returned. I cornered him in the garage, showing him the text from M. Uncle Marcus? I challenged, my voice shaking. What kind of trouble is he dragging you into, and why keep this from Elisa? My anger was no longer about lost love, but about protecting my sister from potential ruin. Gabriel's face drained of color. He looked utterly defeated, running a hand through his hair in pure exhaustion. He finally broke, the wall he had carefully constructed shattering. He confessed that Marcus was threatening to sue Elisa's charitable foundation, an action that could destroy her reputation. But his next words were the real shock. He admitted he was paying off Marcus with his savings, the savings that were meant to pay for his wedding to my sister. Gabriel's confession was a devastating twist, transforming him from a suspected cheat to a desperate hero. The savings intended for his wedding with Elisa were being drained to protect her from Uncle Marcus's venomous lawsuit. The pain in his eyes was genuine, the burden of a man sacrificing his own happiness for the woman he was trying to marry. But still, a crucial piece of the puzzle was missing. Why, Gabriel? Why didn't you just tell Elisa? She would have understood. I pressed, the question hanging heavy in the cool garage air. The financial danger was immense, but the emotional deceit was the real ticking time bomb. Hiding the secret was almost as destructive as an affair. It shattered the foundation of trust. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a raw whisper filled with regret. I couldn't. Elisa already thinks Marcus is a saint. He's her godfather. If I told her he was trying to destroy her foundation, it would crush her faith in family. I needed time to make the problem disappear, to shield her from that kind of ugly truth. His nobility was heartbreaking, but his methods were catastrophically wrong. Then the conversation took a sharp, painful turn back to our past. He looked at me, his gaze intense and regretful. And then you came back, Livia. It threw everything into chaos. He admitted that the only reason he was so cold and distant was to maintain boundaries, terrified that his current stress would push him back into my arms, breaking his commitment to Elisa. His admission confirmed my darkest fears and my lingering hope. The romantic tension between us was real and mutual. He was trying to protect his relationship with Elisa by avoiding me, only succeeding in fueling my desperate passion. The intense closeness of the moment, the shared secret, the emotional honesty, felt like an intoxicating taste of what we once had. We stood there, two conspirators bound by a dangerous family secret and an even more dangerous forbidden attraction. The line between right and wrong blurred, replaced by the acute, searing reality of two people who should have been together. But before either of us could act on the current of attraction surging between us, Gabriel's final admission shattered the fragile peace. Marcus knows about us, Livia. He knows we were together, and he's using that secret to blackmail me.
Uncle Marcus's blackmail was the final, brutal piece of the puzzle, revealing the true danger of the situation. He wasn't just threatening Elisa's career, he was threatening to detonate the single biggest secret in our family, exposing the truth of my first love and Gabriel's ultimate deception. The moment Gabriel confessed, the entire narrative shifted from a forbidden romance to a high-stakes ethical crisis that could ruin all three of us. I was stunned. "How does Marcus know?" I demanded, my voice barely a whisper, a cold dread settling in my stomach. The history between Gabriel and me was ancient, buried under years of silence and distance. Gabriel looked utterly defeated, explaining that Marcus had hired the investigator not just to find dirt on Elisa's foundation, but to find leverage on him personally, and he had succeeded spectacularly. Marcus's threat was chillingly precise. If Gabriel didn't pay the remaining massive sum immediately, he wouldn't just publicize the foundation's alleged legal discrepancies, he would deliver proof of my past relationship with Gabriel straight to Elisa on their wedding day. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about tearing apart a family by leveraging long-buried heartbreak and the absolute breakdown of trust. The ethical dilemma was crushing. Gabriel had protected Elisa from the lawsuit, but by hiding the truth, he had made himself vulnerable to a far worse attack. I realized that my return home, motivated by debt, was an unfortunate catalyst that reignited Gabriel's emotional stress, making him an easier target for Marcus's manipulative games. Our presence under the same roof had become a liability. "We have to tell her, Gabriel," I insisted, desperation lacing my voice. "We have to tell Elisa everything, about us, about Marcus, all of it, before he does. The shock will be immense, but the truth from us is better than the betrayal from him." The time for silence was over. Honesty, however painful, was the only way to retain any integrity and save my sister from a public humiliation. Gabriel took a deep, shuddering breath, his eyes meeting mine with a mixture of fear and profound relief, as if the burden of the secret was finally lifting. "You're right, Livia," he conceded, the strength returning to his voice. "We owe her the truth." We knew the confession would destroy her trust and possibly their wedding, but it was the right, difficult choice. But as we walked toward her room, ready to deliver the painful revelation, we found a sealed, hand-delivered envelope waiting on the door handle. It was addressed only to Elisa. The sight of the sealed envelope, clearly placed by someone who had been inside the house, sent a fresh wave of panic through us. We knew instantly it was from Marcus, a malicious delivery designed to preempt our confession. Gabriel and I exchanged a terrified glance, our decision to tell the truth coming moments too late. I snatched the envelope, but Gabriel stopped my hand. "It's hers, Livia. She has to be the one to open it." We entered Elisa's room, our faces white with dread. She was sitting up in bed, looking through old photo albums, her expression melancholic but determined. She looked up, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "What is it?" she asked, seeing the fear in our eyes and the ominous envelope in my hand. There was no gentle way to do this. The time for careful handling was over. "Elisa, you need to read this," Gabriel said, his voice thick with guilt and sorrow. "And Livia and I need to tell you the entire truth about our past and about Marcus, all of it." He placed his hands on her bedside table, bracing himself for the explosion. Elisa's brow furrowed in confusion, but the sheer gravity of our demeanor compelled her to take the envelope, her hand trembling. She tore open the seal, pulling out several glossy photos, pictures of Gabriel and me, 7 years ago, laughing, holding hands, sharing a kiss beneath the old oak tree. The image was undeniable. She looked at the photos, then at Gabriel, then at me, her face cycling through disbelief, confusion, and finally a devastating, raw comprehension. Her world was imploding in front of her eyes, and we were the architects of the disaster. Elisa didn't scream or cry immediately. Her reaction was a terrifying, icy stillness. She looked straight at me, her eyes dead. "You," she whispered, the single word dripping with more pain than any yell could convey. "My sister,
the person who should have protected me. Then she turned to Gabriel, the wedding ring shimmering on her finger, and slid it off, placing it softly on the bedside table. Get out, both of you. Get out of my house. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum left by the collapse of trust. We were forced to leave, taking only our bags, defeated by our own secrecy. Months later, the dust settled. Elisa called off the wedding and publicly exposed Marcus's attempts at blackmail, turning the social narrative in her favor. Gabriel lost his savings but regained his integrity. I haven't spoken to either of them since, but I learned the hardest lesson. A lie you tell to protect someone is just a different kind of betrayal, and genuine love requires the courage to face the painful truth, even if it means losing everything.